Alright, this is a comprehensive tier list to how useful the items are in Buckshot Roulette's multiplayer. Skip to this timestamp to get to the tier list. In the meantime, I'm going to give a brief overview of the story and universe of Buckshot Roulette for those who don't know. There's also a video that gives a great in-depth description of all the stories in this dystopic world, and I'll link it in the description for those who want to learn more. These games, and thus the world painted by Mike Klubnica, is one where technology and industry was pushed beyond limits in the 80s and 90s, leading to both life-saving tech and hellish industrial projects. Parts of the world still live happily and normally as seen in Mike Klubnica's game Inverter, but even then some people used hellishly industrialized machines to do their jobs and get paid from time to time. Mike Klubnica both clearly grew up in a concrete jungle and was inspired by horror games that had a gritty aesthetic. One in particular that directly inspired Klubnica was Inscription, as mentioned in the credits of Buckshot Roulette. His games also have a running theme of humans trying to study or combat creatures of outer-worldly proportions, things like aliens, demons being outright confirmed in his games. There's also eldritch horrors being alluded to. Funny enough, Klubnica uses a ball almost like a placeholder for his enemies in his games, which inevitably made one of the more iconic antagonists of video game horrors in the year of our Lord 2024. A fucking placeholder sphere mesh basically evolved to be Klubnica's flagship bad guy. With the baseline lore out of the way, let's get into the tier list. Right off the bat, let's get to everyone's favorites. You already knew it before clicking on this video. You can tell what goes to the top by the goddamn tier label. Boys and girls, we can't deny ourselves. We all pocket Magnifying Glass and Siggies. We stan Magnifying Glass and Siggies in this house, okay? Doesn't fucking matter who you are, black or white. Well, I guess all of our lungs are black from the motherfucking Newports. It doesn't matter if you're straight or gay. The L in LGBTQ stands for L&M, and the T stands for tar lungs. One thing I'll mention about this list is that all the items to the left are stronger than the items to the right. So without a shadow of a doubt, Marlboros, the motherfucking Newports, the Camels, the Winstons are the undisputed throat goat. You use your goddamn morphine to steal ciggies. You burn your morphine just for a pack of ciggies. That's how good they are. Don't fucking lie to yourself. Last note about the tier list and how it's structured is that this is keeping in mind the dynamic these items play in 4 players. For example, an item like the jammer is going to be a bit lower on the tier list because it guarantees one person will hard focus you the rest of the game, whereas every game I've played, even long after I've shot someone, feuds are eventually forgiven unless you use the jammer. So naturally, that makes the ciggies that much better because the ciggies don't target anyone. Everyone loves ciggies. No one's going to hate you for smoking a cig. They know you gotta take the edge off. Even for an item as god tier as the Magnifying Glass, as I said before, every game I've played, feuds change eventually, so using a guaranteed shot is forgiven just as fast as a regular shot. You have to eventually shoot someone, it's the only way of winning the game, and having a tool that guarantees damage or helps your odds of a live round is god tier. Especially since it can be comboed with the Buzzsaw and the Inverter. These are the busted characters in a fighting game that everyone pockets. No one wants to admit they're above the rest. Those who main them do it with shame, but everyone pockets them because they're just that good. So we're all Siggies and Magnifying Glass mains. Or chain smokers, what's the difference? Oh yeah, and expired pills are here too. They got patched out because they made rounds last longer than they already do. If you had more than 1 HP, so you didn't end your round, there was no reason not to use the pills. Granted, there's no reason not to use the ciggies either when you're hurt, but at least those give back 1 HP instead of 2. I believe they're patched out. Some say they're still in the game, but I've played dozens of games and never seen them since the beta. One drug that is still in the game but is equally goated is morphine. We call morphine mains MS Cottons. The only reason morphine is the tier below but still in the goated A tier is because you have to steal an item from someone, and that makes an enemy, whereas using your own item by itself won't upset the young chain smoker. You can also steal a magnifying glass from a player on your left and shoot the player on your right, and now you've made 2 enemies. So morphine easily sits as the king of A tier. It's friendship ending time. We get to the handsaw mains. Handsaw mains are called ops. If you use the handsaw, you fully intend to end alliances at the table. Shooting someone with a round is forgivable after some time as new enemies emerge, but shooting someone with 2 whole damage will make you hard focused like those who use the jammer. If you intend to use the handsaw or jammer, make sure you finish off that person before they finish off you. Handsaw without the magnifying glass is also extremely dangerous, because you could deal 2 damage to yourself. But hey, the name of the game is damage, so Handsaw sits comfortably in A tier. Also, it goes with the bread and butter combo with the magnifying glass, as I said before. Baby's first combo in single player. Then again, babies shouldn't be near loaded guns. I just made myself depressed for no reason. I thought this was a fun tier list. Next up is the jammer mains. Conceptually, you're the same as the bone saw mains. Jammer mains are just that. You make a hard enemy at the table, but instead of dealing 2 damage, you just prevent 1 damage from being dealt to you, because you just stole your op's turn. It is nice to get your own turn faster, and jamming might help strengthen alliances you already have, as everyone at the table, but your op, gets to take their turn sooner. But otherwise, you're not in as much control as the raw bonesaw or morphine for that matter. So the bottom of A tier. The bottom of the best, like me. Next up, we have the most controversial and possibly skillful item in the game. I've actually seen lobbies where players ban this item and kick anyone that uses it. My theory is that babies don't like the memorization part of the game, and just want to do straight statistics. So using the inverter makes their heads hurt a little bit more, because they can't do the extra math. And to that I say, you're a bitch. And for that, we'll give the inverter mains the name Brainiac. Unfortunately, I can't use the Chad face for how good of a player you are, but you rely on smarts, so the inverter mains are called actually. It's okay. Ops don't get the satisfaction of betting the current shell is a blank, turning that blank into a live round, and blasting a motherfucker. It's so satisfying to guess right. Inverter, my beloved, sits proudly at the top of B tier. Next up is the controller, and I think this is where my tier list starts to become more subjective to the general public. I mean, these past items have been pretty much unanimous in their placements, but these remaining 3 items are going to vary greatly based on which player you ask. And if you ask me, I think the remote control goes to the bottom of B tier. I know a lot of people think the remote belongs at the very bottom, but the remote can be really useful for finishing off opponents. It's like a discount jammer. Your op has to wait 3 more players' turns, but only if that op is to the left or right of you. So conceptually, the same as a jammer, but slightly less effective, especially as more and more people are knocked out. This is also the best item for making alliances. Imagine you like the person to your left, and you use the remote at the end of your turn. That guy to your left is going to be so happy he takes 2 turns almost in a row. Best alliance making tool, but it becomes less and less viable than the outright jammer when there's less players at the table. For those reasons, it stays at the bottom of B tier. We call remote mains boomers. Finally, we get into the items that are incredibly niche, starting with the king of C tier, the cellular device. The cell phone, when there's 4 players, is nearly impossible to capitalize off of. And even if you warn a player that 2 turns later they get a live shell, they might not believe you. So regardless if you're playing with VC or mutes, the cell phone is nearly useless. Where the cell phone shines is when there's less players. So if it isn't you that's knocked out already, you can finally capitalize on it, and even then there's a big maybe. A player could use a jammer or a remote or an inverter and completely throw off your memorization or the prediction of the cell phone. Even in a 1v1 duel, this is still the case. So very niche to say the least, but it still serves a purpose. C tier. Cell phone mains are called zoomers. And finally, we get to the bottom bitch, the beer, the alcoholics. I mean, what other name would you give beer mains? Beer's function is to make the statistics a bit easier, or if you're unsure about what the round in the chamber might be, so you just chug a beer. I personally don't see the use, since changing the statistics of how many rounds are initially in the chamber doesn't make the difference to me. If there's 4 live rounds and 4 blanks, your chances are the same to hit someone if there were 2 live rounds and 2 blanks. But then there's the argument that if you chug a beer when there's 4 and 4, and you eject a blank, now your chances are 57% of a live. But if you have a round where it's 2 live and 2 blanks, and you chug a beer and you eject a blank, now your chances are 66%. So there is a use. Hit yourself without the risk, and improve your odds of a live round. It's more niche because you only get more notable chances when there are less rounds, and hopefully you don't eject a live round. It sucks to miss out on damage. I'm a go-getter who will take the chances as is, and let someone else worry about the large amount of rounds in the shotgun. So I consider beer the most niche of all the items, but not useless. As you can see from how I structure the tier list, the worst item is C tier, not D or F tier. You all serve a purpose. So that's it for the tier list. The world of Buckshot Roulette is an interesting one, and similar to Inscription, which Mike Klubnica was inspired by, Klubnica and the company he's partnered with have started an ARG. This will expand the world of Buckshot Roulette, so I can't wait to see where the lore goes. As for items themselves, I consider myself an inverter main. Because to me, the most satisfying is to guess the current shell is blank, turn it into a live, and hit someone with damage I would have otherwise missed. Excluding viability, what item is your favorite conceptually? Are you a cell phone main? Do you stan Bonesaw? Are you an alcoholic? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe for more. Other than that, I'll see you in the next story and the occasional tier list.